The weakest nobody wizard in your party could become richer than a real medieval king with a single cantrip he casts for free. And it makes no sense. I think 90% of DMs completely overlook the amazing opportunities this represents to make their worlds deeper and their campaigns more immersive. So, in this video, we will look at 15 ways in which wizards make no sense at all that you haven't considered before and can use to make your games more exciting. Let's start with Prestidigitation. It's a cantrip, which means you can cast it all day, for free, forever. But if you look at the spell description, you can flavor a bland meal, clean a dirty set of clothes, chill a drink, freshen the air in a room, etc, etc. Now, consider your typical medieval town. Chilling food replaces an ice house or salt or a cellar somebody paid a fortune to dig. Cleaning clothes in 6 seconds turns you into a human laundry machine. Flavoring food replaces spices kings paid fortunes and went to war for. My point is, your bored level 1 nobody does all of this at will at zero cost, and the moment a service costs nothing to provide, its price goes down to zero. For example, a book used to be a monk's entire year, but when people invented the printing press, copying got cheap, and the whole economy of knowledge fell apart and had to rebuild itself. Later, the same thing happened again with free digital copies. So, okay, but what's the problem in our D&D case then? Well, the spell was never the problem. Prestidigitation is cool. The problem is that most worlds just don't take it into account, and that is a massive hidden opportunity. Now, if you think it's a game though, why would we need to overthink this? My answer is, well, you don't have to overthink it, but I think the payoff can be worth it, because it will make the world feel more aligned with the rules we're using to play the game, and therefore more immersive, which will lead to better games. So, we're gonna explore 4 families of consequences that go from mundane to disturbing. To start, I would like you to think about your last market town. It probably had a blacksmith, a baker, maybe a water seller. The point is, it was probably filled with many typical medieval sounding jobs, and most of them sell something a cantrip or low-level spell does for free. So this family deals with that, how wizards impact prices, guilds, and the economy, and how you can use it to create unlimited adventures. The first one is what we could call the fabricate problem. Now, I know fabricate is not that low level, but it's not exactly wish either. Fabricate can turn raw wood into a finished wall, or a pile of ore into swords, in about 10 seconds. And before you say, no, it can't produce anything that complex, my answer is, it can't unless you have proficiency with the type of artisan's tools used to craft such objects. Which means a wizard can technically kind of replace a whole guild of carpenters, and the mending cantrip also takes many jobs away. Why does anyone still pay a cobbler in your world? This is where the world building opportunity hides, because you don't have to conclude that only magic users do these jobs. You can also conclude, well, the craftsmen got very organized a long time ago, and they legally banned or licensed fabricate and mending, which automatically gives you people who enforce these policies, black market builders, and criminal wizards mending shoes for the poor, which can lead to adventure ideas many of you probably never thought about. What if the wizard PC got into trouble for warming their soup at the tavern? What if the party had to escape from jail because they helped some village rebuild the wooden bridge that got destroyed? You can give it a comedic or tragic tone, and that's what I love about it. Before I move on, if you like these ideas and would like to hear more, please consider subscribing to help me keep this channel going. 80% of regular watchers aren't subscribed, and it does not cost anything and will help me make more videos for you guys. So, thanks in advance. Next, we have Continual Flame. It has a material cost, so maybe it does not replace every single torch in town, but it makes no heat and, more importantly, burns no fuel, which means the wealthy probably used it to come up with a public lighting system. But it can be dispelled, so maybe you could use this to create some sort of guild who owns the streetlights. If a district falls behind on its dues, they dispel the lights, and because they want to ensure they have power, they lobbied the authorities into banning torches. Again, Yeah, you can make it a cool adventure. Maybe a wealthy district didn't pay the bill on time, and because they never thought it would happen, nobody has torches, and now you have nobles going to war against the Light Guild. The next spell I think we should look at to understand how much wizards don't make sense in the best possible way is Teleportation Circle. Real-world trade is all about logistics. My favorite anecdote is when Europeans started to cross the Atlantic and found out about pineapples, it became so cool and exotic to have a pineapple that companies emerged to rent pineapples to nobles so they could show off how insanely rich they were at parties. And that's how much good logistics impact the economy. So, if we go back to D&D and imagine a merchant guild controlling a permanent teleportation circle, just imagine the power. You're basically a trade god. Your products arrive fresh and at a much lower cost. So maybe you could build a faction around this, a cartel that hoards the sigil sequences between two important towns, or a crown that nationalized every teleport hub. And again, you get smuggling, embargoes, border politics, and even wars that can be fought over a single room used to transport grain, which would even probably have an impact on the architecture. The takeaway from this first family is that magic is cool to nova monsters during combat, sure, but it also deletes scarcity, and because economy kind of runs on scarcity, on things being rare and hard to get, magic changes the rules entirely. And you thinking about how gives you opportunities to create worlds and adventures that will feel very fresh. But money is only the first, more obvious effect. If the consequences are so massive, what happens to the people around it? But just before we move on to the next family, I need to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, which is Liber Novo, and I'm actually sitting in the product as I edit this video. This is the Maxis chair. So I'm 6'3", and if you're anywhere in that range, you probably bought a chair that claimed it was made for tall people before, and then you got a regular chair, only bigger, which is not what you wanted. The Maxis is the first one I've tried where that's actually not the case. Liber Novo engineered this thing from the ground up for people between 5'10 and 6'7. So for once, I'm the target user. The seat is deep enough that my legs are actually fully supported, and the base is cast aluminum, which means zero wobble when I lean back for the dramatic pause during an online DMing session. You know the one. Mine is the airflow version, which adds powered lumbar support and ventilation straight through the seat, which actually does feel awesome. It's also just an extremely comfortable ergonomic chair beyond the tall person stuff. You get 5 recline positions, going from fully upright all the way to nearly flat. And that flat one is obviously not for running the game, but paired with the leg rest they sent me, it is great for taking a break between editing sessions on these videos. As a DM, I've read a lot of magic item descriptions, and this is the closest thing I've found to a +5 chair of power. Links in the description if you want to check it out, and thanks again, Liber Novo. Now, we briefly touched on it, but the second something is worth real money, somebody will build something to own it. In our case, institutions like guilds, churches, bureaucracies, etc. will emerge to control, license, and police the magic. But they're not your regular factions either. First, I would like you to imagine a wizard who spends years inventing a brand new spell, something nobody else can cast. And my question is, who owns that? In our world, we use patents, licenses, and trade secrets to protect bankable inventions. I think it's cool to imagine how this would translate to magic. What if spells were just the most insane kind of intellectual property? Maybe you get a spellcasters guild that treats new spells as powerful formulas, and magic universities are essentially large corporate overlords that are the only ones with access to certain spells. Maybe the different magic schools like evocation, illusion, etc. are owned by different companies, and because the corporate magic overlords want power, they actively track and kill innate magic users because they threaten their whole model. And there are a bunch of other spells with similar kinds of consequences on factions. Like, institutions want power, sure, and we talked about trade secrets, but how does that work in a world with scrying? Because that spell kind of means secrets are extremely unsafe. Like you can try to get access to the enemy general's plans from 100 miles away, for example. But surveillance always means counter-surveillance, which means you can create a mage order selling anti-scry protection, and paranoia could become a status symbol. It also means that the wizard of the party can become a spy for hire, which leads to many cool adventuring opportunities. Now, for our next item, I would like you to think about lock and password. The existence of these spells means that physical security is not for everyone, and that risk will get priced. These kinds of spells naturally lead to you creating medical banks, insurance companies, and more generally, many cool NPCs and heist hooks to use in your campaigns. What if an insurer's guild hired the party to recover a magically stolen artifact before they're forced to pay out? There, free adventure for you guys. The point is, a society with cheap power does not stay free, and instead it hardens. Institutions will hoard that power and police who gets to touch it. That's a gift for DMs, because the factions build themselves when you pull on the thread. But money and power don't just reshape the organized aspect of the world. I think wizards and magic would also change the texture of daily life, and that's where it gets really fun. In this next family, we'll look at etiquette, law, courtship, funerals, and more generally all the little rituals that make up ordinary life. I think a world where everyone knows these spells are real would just have different manners, and this is the cheapest, highest flavor stuff you can drop into a game. Let's start with something a bit gloomy. In a world with Speak with the Dead, a murdered man can probably name his killer. So, what does that do to the idea of evidence and justice? You get courts that subpoena corpses, wills that would get confirmed after death, and insurance fights that get settled by interrogating dear old dead grandpa. Institutions form around any reliable news source of truth. It's what happened in the real world with forensic science and our own courtrooms, for example. But the part I love the most is what happens next, which is that the killers will learn the spell's limits. It only answers a few questions, and the mouth has to exist. So maybe they destroy the corpse, or maybe the most elite assassins are expert manipulators who feed leading questions and manipulate their target ahead of time, so that when they get interrogated after they die, they point to a specific person. This could be a whole adventure. The party gets approached by a noble whose friend was convicted of murder, and everyone saw the victim accuse them in court. But the person hiring the party is convinced their friend is innocent, and they will pay well to expose the real socialite killer who infiltrated their home a while back. I'll do the next two quickly because I think you get the point. We're trying to look at certain spells and imagine what would happen to the world if these had been a part of it for a long time. But I really like those next two, so there you go. The sending spell lets you send short messages to anyone, anywhere in the world instantly. So basically, the telegraph network, only more powerful. So steal this, a message broker guild that charges people to become acquainted with their casters so they can send them important messages quickly. It could be used for war, but maybe also adultery, who knows? Second one is about funerals, which is exciting, I know. Gentle repose stops a body from decaying, which does not look like much, but think about what that might do to funerals. You don't need to rush as much. You might hope to keep the dead fresh while you try and gather funds to bring them back. Maybe the wealthy cast it on their dead every 10 days, and burying people becomes a working class thing. Imagine an NPC who kept his late wife preserved for 20 years, unable to let her go, and is now running out of funds, so they will have to stop paying the spellcaster soon. It can be a cool detail or a plot hook, because maybe they have something the party wants and a deal could be made. I believe that the deepest world building isn't always flashy. If you spend time on manners, on how people greet each other, on how they grieve or marry, etc., you get a very deep world that feels very different from our own and begs to be explored. But okay, so far we looked at power, money, customs, and those all sit outside a singular person. And our next family is different. We're going to take a look at how wizards and magic existing impacts people's minds. And this is the biggest missed opportunity for DMs. These spells all share one trait. If magic like this were constant and known, it would basically reshape the human mind. A person raised in that world wouldn't think like a medieval peasant, but they wouldn't think like us either. And this means deep roleplay opportunities. First, I would like you to ask yourself, if you were rich and knew you could be raised from the dead, would you act any differently? I recently made a video exploring all the consequences resurrection magic could have on a fantasy setting, and it's one of my personal favorites I've made so far. You can check it out here, so I won't repeat everything I said in there, but basically I think we'd get an entire cast of people whose psyche works very differently. We'd start seeing people who duel to death as a hobby, or do poison drinking parties. Basically, risk is very different in a world where such magic exists. The most wicked individuals might not fear their very real god and think, worst case, I become a vampire, or something. I think there is a lot of deep psychologically based adventure ideas hiding in there. Then I like to think about what it actually does to you on a personal level when you know that a mind, maybe your mind, could be bent by magic. If someone can get inside your head and turn a no into a yes, can you ever fully trust your own feelings again? You start asking questions. Did you love that person? Or were you charmed one evening and never found out? Be careful around these topics because consent is a very real and very important thing in the real world, so, make sure everyone agrees and knows that this is purely fiction. But I think that enchantment structurally alters the people's relationship with truth and consent. In the real world, we have drugs that can alter people's minds, but it leaves a trace, And enchantment can be a lot more permanent, targeted, and easier to hide. So contracts, confessions, loyalty oaths, etc. can become suspect under the right circumstances. So yeah, you have the structural changes we talked about earlier in this video here too, with important contracts being signed inside anti-enchantment wards, etc. But, ask yourself, how would that impact the psychology of individuals in their daily lives? Maybe people all get scared of eye contact, for example. But maybe it gets even darker than this. In a world where you can literally see the future with powerful divination magic, why would anyone make a big decision without asking first? If you generalize this to an entire culture, I think you quickly arrive at a paralysis by prophecy kind of situation, where fatalism becomes very prominent. The oracle didn't say we should move, so we won't move, basically. How do rulers act at an individual level in that kind of society? How do people decide what they want to do with their own lives? Etc., etc. I think wizards, and I hope you can excuse me, I know we talked about spells other casters can cast too, but you get the point. I think wizards were never too powerful for your world. But I do think most worlds are too lazy to react to them. When I said that a level 1 wizard could become richer than a king at the beginning of this video, I wasn't complaining about balance or anything. You can totally ignore all of this, say it does not matter, and play in a world with both wizards and regular non-unionized cobblers and have a perfectly good time. But I do think exploring these ideas is a massive opportunity for DMs. One of the biggest struggles as a DM is finding fresh-sounding ideas to surprise and entertain players. Tropes are not bad in essence, but after a while, you can get kind of tired of always playing the same kind of tavern and dungeon-based artifact retrieval adventures. So, what if you could just generate ideas that feel fresh and exciting and that led you to ask yourself questions about human nature by just browsing the player's handbook, looking at a spell and wondering how it would break the world and what would people actually do with this? You can also use this as a way to make your players care more. If there's a spellcaster in the group, maybe you send them this video. Ask them, you always use that spell. What if we build something around that? And then make a new piece of the world with them around that idea. It will make the game world feel richer and more immersive. And players love it when they get to interact with stuff they built. So if it's something they use all the time, like their favorite spell, you get a big free win. I honestly don't really care about realism. I'm not saying, oh, but D&D worlds are not realistic. I'm just saying, what if you've been sleeping on the coolest ideas just because you didn't look? So start looking. I'm sure you will get many ideas which will lead to better games. But then you will have a problem. How do I structure and include all of these ideas into something I can actually use during my next session? Prep feels so overwhelming. And to this, I answer, you should click on this video next, where I will show you an addictive prep system that will make you stop dreading prep in just 18 minutes.